Hello all and welcome to our ZoidRush. I'm your host Tmzoids, also known as Tony, and today we're going to be talking about if NA and EU LCS players and teams really care about winning worlds. That's the main objective. Now, two disclaimers before I continue here. The first disclaimer, I'm not stating that for this is a fact that these players or organizations believe this or don't want to win. I'm not saying they don't. I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth. It's just my perspective, so I'm not saying that. And also, two, I'm going to be mentioning teams, specific examples to back up my point. So I don't want any people be like, oh, you just picked on TSM. I'm representing them as a whole. I'm talking about NA as a whole and EU as a whole. So just to be clear. I don't want people, oh, dude, you're talking about my team and you didn't mention them, though. So just calm down, calm down. But let's get right into it. The first thing we're going to talk about is progression, world's progressions, and what better teams that we can use to represent EU and NA are TSM and Fnatic. That's correct. I'm going to be talking about TSM and Fnatic. And you're wondering, well, why are you bringing up Fnatic and TSM? Well, one, those are the two teams that I guess you could say represent their regions most often at Worlds. I'm not saying they are the representation of NA or EU themselves, but they are most shown and consecutively gone to Worlds and should have the most progression, most world experience with against the best players in the world. That being stated, also when I continue here, I know Fnatic won Season 1, and when looking at the LCS, we want to look at progression from like Season 3 till now, and why I say that, even you can take Season 2 kind of, but mostly Season 3. And why do we want to use that? Is because Worlds has become more diverse in teams and the amount of teams that are allowed to play at Worlds. We have two wildcard teams now, three Korean teams, three Chinese teams, three NA teams, and of course three EU teams. So that is much more diverse, much more competition there. And when you're looking back at Season 1 and even really Season 2, it was mostly NA, EU, maybe one or two Korean teams, not really that representative. And I think one Chinese team, not even a Chinese team, if I'm not too sure. So we're focusing on Season 3 and above. So let's start with progression. Let's start with the lovely TSM. So TSM, as you guys know, we're like known for not winning the Worlds for the simple fact they couldn't beat a Korean team. They're like, oh, we can't beat Korean teams. There's no way we can beat a Korean team. They get shit on it, group stages, losing out to Cloud9 back in Season 3 where Cloud9 dominates. So they had to go through the group stages and just got kind of steamrolled there and didn't really do well in groups. Couldn't win against a Korean team for whatever case that may be. Then the following year you have TSM once again at groups, and they finally progress. They're doing well. This is what people are talking about when they talk about progression one step at a time. They're like, hey, we got a groups, now we're going to get quarterfinals, and they went against Samsung White. And some people are like, well, they took a game off the best team, Samsung White, and almost took another one. And I'm not going to get too much into that. I have my own opinions about that game. I feel like there's little to no respect from the Korean teams or Samsung White that specific game. Looking at their pick ban phases and just how they played, it was careless. But we'll give it to you, TSM fans. They progressed. That's great. TSM's running through, and then you take last year. You take last year and you're looking at it and you're going, this is a deep progression. You think as somebody that has this much world experience, has been in the worlds a few times now, kind of knows the way how things are going to work, scrimming's going to work, and how the play style and the meta, in their favor, what's in the meta and what's not in the meta, and just kind of have that coaching experience, just overall, or management experience of having a world being there so many times, but they deep progressed. Like they weren't even talked about last split. I know they played games, but honestly, TSM was not mentioned when it came to representing NA last year. It was Cloud9 and COG. Which, on a little side note there, they were running one comp, and we talked about this before, and running one comp just kind of blows my mind. Like, they didn't have anything else, and they just banked off the Protect the ADC comp, or Juggernaut comp, as you want to call it. So, TSM was doing their own thing. They kind of just rolled out of the Worlds, and now we're just going this year, and looking at progression, you also want to look at them as representing the NA, LCS, and they really didn't do this too hot this year. If you're really looking at it, they were in sixth place. They did come back at Worlds, patch changes helped them out there and whatnot, getting them in second place overall, but they weren't doing too hot. They're already doing roster changes. It looks like TSM's looking for a new support already again, and we'll just see how it goes from here. But right now, I say they deprogress. So that is not one way to win the Worlds. I'm just saying that if I just remember making a comment on my fan Facebook, and somebody was like, "Oh, we need to not focus too much on this Worlds and just focus on the going forward." But if we're looking at it going forward from the last Worlds, they really have not done well. They've deprogressed, as I said, getting sixth place, not synergizing well as a team, just not really there clicking. Now we're gonna go to Fnatic representing, so we have equal sides here. You got Fnatic here. Besides winning Worlds 1s, you can look at World 2. They didn't really do too hot, or when I say Worlds 2, I'm talking about the second World, Season 2. They didn't do too hot there, really. They lose out to Gambit. Gambit was supposed to win, and then, lo and behold, TPA takes the win. And then starting off, it just seems like Fnatic's deprogressed overall. They did get to quarterfinals and then, of course, semifinals against Cloud9 because they won against Cloud9. The pick ban phase once again, Cloud9. We'll talk about that in a little bit there in the future, or this later in the video. But so you're thinking they're progressing also, but I also have to say no, they're not, because after Cloud9's defeat, they did all right in semifinals. They got eliminated, but they did okay. But then looking 2 years ago when we had Xpeke, Xpeke was going against OMG, and that was pretty much the game changer there. Fnatic's management style and just was not there. It just seemed like the team wasn't clicking well, and it just seems like there was butting heads between management and the team players, which, as you can see, Xpeke and a bunch of team members left. But it really came down to that 7-minute game against OMG. If you don't remember, it was like base race, oh my god, and it came down to like one hit that OMG's Nexus was going to explode, but nobody could get there from Fnatic, and then OMG just had the better team late game and just dominated them, and then steamrolled and won the game, late game. So you look at that and you're like, okay, they deprogressed because they couldn't get out of groups. And then last year they were supposed to be the favorite people because you had Fnatic, Reignover, or Fnatic, sorry. They had Huni, Reignover, just a dominating top jungle ordeal. Fabevan was doing really well in the bot lane. You had Reckless, and of course there's support that I can't think of right off the top of my head, Yellowstar. So that you had just a great team. Everybody was supposed to do well, and once again they flopped. It was like either the management didn't do well or the players choked at it. You could say, oh well, there were new players, it was the first time at Worlds, blah blah blah, but these are the best of the best, and I think playing on the professional stage, even though it's a little bit different playing from world stage than on a regular EU or NA stage, I still think that Fears, you can't just blame Fears for them doing poorly, and they were eliminated again. So once again they deprogressed. I don't see any progression from NA or EU. Even when you see the teams advancing, they didn't really progress at all. Last year, NA, once again, like I said, they used the team comp, which we're not going to go too much into at this moment. But NA was eliminated last year, and then vice versa. It comes back and forth. So the year before that, it was NA. This last year, like I said, it was EU, and EU didn't really progress that far overall. Origin lost out, and of course, what was the other team? H2K, I think, also lost out in the long run. So, talking about that, so there's no progression, no deprogression. The next one's more of a hypothetical question. It seems to be more proven the more and more I looked into it. And I know I bring up Monte Cristo a lot in these videos, but he brings up a lot of good points that I think people don't refute or bring up good counterpoints to them. But one thing Monte Cristo said on a talk show with Thorn, they've had many talk shows, so I cannot remember which one it was, but it was one of the many they've had. And Monte Cristo said, I don't think NA or EU really wants to win a World's Championship, because if they really wanted to go, why not take a bye, one split, LCS split, and go to Korea in boot camp? And when you boot camp at Korea, join the circuit and just join and go against, you're scrimming against the best Korean teams. On top of that, you're getting more fives experiences, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then just overall, you have that experiences being on a stage against Koreans. So it's just not like they're scrimming and they're just giving you their half-ass kind of gameplay. No, you scrim them and you're playing against them and you're getting best of fives. Now, when it comes to best of fives, one thing the LCS is still trying to do and get a little bit better at, where LCK does this all the time, are best of fives, as I keep mentioning. Duh. But the thing about best of fives is that a lot of pro players, especially older players, if you really talk to them, really had no experience with the best of five matches. I recall them talking to Edward, interviewing many pro players who said, "Hey, I've only done like three, maybe four best of fives in my life or in my career, my LOL career," and that is bad. That is really bad because that really tests your endurance. That really tests, just your mental strength of playing 5 games in a row. It's just not like, oh, we play one game in LCS and then we'll play later on. No, it's like one game after the next game after the next game after the next game, and that's why you do better because you adapt. You can see changes. You can see better pick ban phases. You can do ultimately better, and that's why we see the NALCS now being all best of fives. But I still don't think that's enough, especially when every time it should be a best of fives. Best of five, best of five. The more experience with best of fives, the better, because the more you can adapt, the better you can change. And once again, like I said, if it is possible, like I said, Monte Cristo made a hypothetical. I don't know if this is actually possible, but he said, hey, take a bye 1 week off, one year off. Either keep your spot, Riot keeps your spot somehow in the NALCS, or go through the Challenger circuit, which shouldn't be a big of a deal, and then coming back and then playing through NA and representing your region. And that's not even saying if you get good enough, if you have the best enough players in Korea, it's not saying that you couldn't represent Korea anyway and take a win there. But it's kind of unlikely. And people are like, well, Korea's not always the best region. Why does everybody say that Korea's the best region? Well, I'd have to say I disagree because of reports right now. On the off time, it seems that they're boot camping most of the top teams that are already going, such as Cloud9, TSM, and then not really EU, but this is really focused more on NA, are going to Korea right now to boot camp. I think Team Liquid is the only one going to China, if I recall. So if they're not the best team, or if they're not the best region, then why are they going there to boot camp in the first place? And so I don't know, they still hold the best region, and you can also look statistically, they've won two, actually three worlds in a row. You had Samsung, SKT, Samsung White, and SKT yet again, and one of those teams being a recurring champion. So they have to be doing something right. They have to be one of the dominating, stronger teams out there. So that give that there. And number three, this goes more out to the players and management. It just seems like they don't give a flying fuck sometimes about their attitude. Like they just think they're the best. They don't really take the time and effort to really practice. And how can I make this claim when you don't see anything behind the scenes? You don't know how long they scrim. You don't know how long they practice, or you don't know what the management's doing. And it's just the way and attitude of some teams. And what I mean by that is we're going to go back, we're going to kick it old school, and we're going to go back to Cloud9 here. So Cloud9 is a good representation. They dominated the NALCS, just wiping everybody off the floor. Cloud9 was the hope for NA, right? And they got the bye because they were first in the region. So they got a bye in the quarterfinals. They faced Fnatic, as I mentioned earlier. But this was so poorly for Cloud9. They just seemed to be outplayed, outpicked, outbanned. It just seemed nothing went in Cloud9's favor. And let's go to the pick ban phase first off. Fnatic beats them 2-1, and the reason they beat them 2-1, I think it was to see best of threes back then. I think it still is. Maybe it's a best of five. But so Fnatic ends up having Xpeke, which he's known for his Caston. Actually, Xpeke backdoor. Hello, Caston. But he's known for his Caston. This is before Caston got nerfed. And lo and behold, Cloud9 not lets it go one time, which was the first game, which is okay. You learn. They ban it the second time, and then the third time they let it go again, and that comes out to be one of the reasons they've lost. Also, they just didn't seem prepared. They didn't seem like they were ready for Worlds. They just came in really cocky, and just like that, it was like 1, 2, 3, you're done, you're out. And Cloud9's like, oh, okay. And we can even go farther than that. We can also say Immortals. and not just to pick on NA, but Immortals this split. Immortals was dominating in the LCS, just completely doing the same thing over and over and over again, and didn't really change anything up when it came to picks or bans. And when it came to NALCS, they came up to TSM, and TSM 3-0'd them, like being one of the most dominating teams. And some people are still arguing that they are still the most dominant team in the LCS. Just coming in and not changing their pick ban phase. If you look at all three of the games they've lost at TSM, they didn't ban anybody different. They didn't really change their play style. They didn't really adapt well. And you know, it was a running joke that, hey, Double Lift said if you can tilt them once, then they can't win a game, which I don't think that's true. I just think that they just didn't care. Like, they thought they were just the most strong, most dominant team out there, and they just, it blew my mind that they they just threw 3 games in a row, didn't change their pick ban phase, and once again, going back to the NALCS, they really didn't change up or really change their playstyle at all, which is okay. That's a comfortable pick for you, and it works for you, and that's a winning comp, and I'm not saying a lot of people are going to say, well, if it's not broken, don't fix it, which is fine, but at the same time, when we look at Worlds and looking at NA, or even EU, because they kind of held the same, standards of playing the same way, they don't adapt. They don't adapt in best of threes. They don't adapt in best of fives because they don't know what else to do. They don't know any other comp that is just as strong as their comfortable comp. And this is a good time, especially if you're a dominating team, to practice different comps, different bans, just to try it. Even if you lose that game, as long as you get in NALCS and get that spot, you should be okay in the first place because you still have your comfort picks. But at least try something different, at least different bands, at least try different bands, if not different champions top lane that you may or may not be comfortable with. Just something different to see that you could play differently and just adapt differently. Because really, like I said, it came down to that. Like, TSM versus Immortals, like Immortals didn't change their bans really, they didn't really change their playstyle, and you can just blame the management or you could blame the players themselves. And it just frustrated me to see them get 3-0'd when they are probably one of the more dominating teams in the LCS split, or NALCS split. And same thing with EU. They didn't really change things up there. Fnatic just kind of had the same similar comp, steamrolled over everybody, and just dominate. Were better players generally, and better, just mechanically a little bit better, a little bit faster to things. And that works in the EU, but as soon as they figure you out in the Worlds, you need to learn how to change it. Like I said before, COG and Cloud9 were running the Juggernaut comp last split. They went 3-0. They're like, okay, the teams really couldn't adapt because it was the best of ones so far. So it was a round robin of 2 games, right? Or 3, basically 6 games. But a round robin, every team gets to play each other twice. So every team only played them once, so they didn't really adapt to it. They didn't know how to beat it, and it worked out for NA in the first week. But in the second week, they got dominated, and they really didn't know what to do or really know what to pick. After that, once they lost once, they lost twice, lost 3 times, and then both NA teams had a chance to win just 1 game to advance to Worlds, and they lost 4 times in a row. And I just feel like they did not care. They didn't have that effort, that oomph to really change anything, or that management style to really change the gameplay. Even if it was working that one time, I think you should at least have something in the backup plan. So just to reiterate, let's go over some things. Progression. We talked about progression with TSM and Fnatic being the representations of NA and EU being there at Worlds the most. Deprogressed, in my opinion. They've deprogressed. We'll see how they do this Worlds, but they've deprogressed so far, and just don't see the lack of it. I don't see their dominating personalities as I would like to see them in their regions either. Like, they have the most world experience. They kind of know what happens at Worlds, especially the management wise. And I don't see them guiding their players or playing a different style. They still focus on their specific style, especially TSM. And secondly, boot camping in Korea, yeah, you can boot camp, but it's still, like I said, take the year off, especially teams that have the money to do so, TSM, Cloud9. You're still going to have your loyal fans. I don't see how this is not a bad idea, especially when you get more best of fives practice and just generally playing against a better region. So you generally should get better. Even if you had to go through the challenger bracket when you came back, you should be able to dominate the challenger bracket, especially if you're a returning team, like an older team like Cloud9 or TSM or CLG or anyone in EU, Fnatic, Origin, etc., etc. So, and then last but not least, just not caring. Like sometimes they just don't put efforts in the matches, and this, I know I used NA examples, but even in EU examples, they just play the same style. They have that kind of, they're known for this style, but it works in their region. They play with that region or against that region that way. But when it comes outside their region, it's really beatable. It's predictable. They don't really change it up much when it comes to picks, bans, and just their persona or how they look like after the beating, getting lost, losing in a game. They just like, oh yeah, we lost. Better next time, next year. Like what? No, what you should use that like motivation, that loss as a motivation, that push, that drive to do one step better, to really want to win worlds and not just be like, oh yeah, I want to win worlds. Well, we lost last year in quarters. Let's get to semis this year. What are they doing? Like, am I paying attention to Korean teams? When I'm scrimming, can we like do some of their play style? What is strong in Korea right now? Why are they playing that? Why do I think that's strong? Can I adapt that meta? Can I just change my meta overall? So those are three main things. I'm not going to rant too much longer because you're like, oh my god, 20 minutes. Why? Why, Tony? Why? So those are my reasons why I feel that NA and EU really just don't care about winning worlds as long as they get their spot in NA or EU LCS every year and get that paycheck. That's what it really comes down to. I just want job security, which means all I have to do is, play this good. And there's no really motivation to play an extra step level besides money. And yeah, money's nice, but as long as I keep my job, that's really what matters in my opinion. So that is it. I will hope to see you next time. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you have your own comments or your own ideals, put them down in the comments. I'll read them. I always read all the comments. And if you are new here, you should click that subscribe button. You can click after the screen here on that subscribe button, or you can click down below, click subscribe, and check out more of my videos. I'll see you guys next time, guys. Bye-bye.